you, if you could stand. No, I didn't say dance.
No, I'm telling you how he does in his presentations. I'm showing you. He gets into it. If you put that out on the web, I will hurt you with this umbrella.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but we're actually live now.
No, you are not.
Yeah, actually we are.
Hysterical.
Now, mind you, the only one watching is probably Kyle down in the library, but...
Hey, Kyle. Is there audio on?
Yeah, there is.
Hey, Kyle. He does move a lot, though. Seriously, Jonathan, he's a moving talker.
Sign-in sheets, sign-in sheet for my class. Sign-in sheet for my class, and if you're in somebody else's class, sign-in sheet. Thank you all for coming. What did I do with them? Let me tell you about Phi Theta Kappa scholarships. I'll talk about them in class on Monday, and you need to join Phi Theta Kappa and then apply for some of their transfer scholarships. Scholarship to Berea. We've had students from Jefferson who have gotten Phi Theta Kappa transfer scholarships.
Because I thought it's so strange, it was like really up my alley and everything.
It's celebrating.
It's fine, I just found it a little strange.
Yeah. Not following us.
This is all right.
And everything. We'll take some candy to the road.
I plan.
Okay.
Just so you're aware, it is already live, so. Oh.
So they can.
Yes.
We do. We are already live, so
Hi, everyone.
we'll say hi to everybody.
Name's Javiera.
We're live with nobody in here.
Very tired, I just had a Red Bull.
We'll have some water and some sweets, sugar will help. I'm making a note, and I may send you an email about it.
Yes, please. Oh, I love please.
Because we need more Phi Theta Kappa.
Did you buy all of this?
Hey,
Mary. Oh, it sounds like you bought a ton of stuff.
The dean of our,
Oh, okay.
the dean of our campus provided some.
Oh, okay, I was about to say.
And there's some water.
You're crazy.
No, I bought the international food, so you need to try something from another country. Are those from different countries?
Oh, these are so cute.
And did you all write down questions? Please ask questions.
I have them memorized already, but I didn't write them down.
Okay, well, I just thought it would be nice to have them.
I'm going to bring up an argument.
So, you want to
Yeah.
I just want to do it where you all can figure out the process.
No, it's running in the other room like you wanted.
I don't think we're gonna have.
Yeah, I mean, we used to do it years ago.
It's her fault.
It was sort of first come, first served, but then it,
But it's nice to have a lot of international.
And go back to that same link and see the report.
Just to try to see.
So, yeah.
And some water.
Trying to push the
A
things
couple
like,
of peanut butter cups.
that's kind of like golden real estate.
oh, yeah, it's a nice office.
Yeah, and I think so too. And it's like, shoot, I think it's a wonderful place. So it's kind of like one of the prime places on campus. So, we need to look at that and decide. And if they say they're here, that's one thing.
Right.
And then we hold it for maybe something special, you know what I'm saying? So, anyway, I don't know. I just wanted to tell you, but I wasn't that I had disregarded it. I was actually thinking about sending it out. I just didn't know how to send it out. It's like, how do you send that out to folks? It's like, hey,
Yeah.
who's, whatever. And then it's such a, it's
Oh,
I saw you running around campus all morning.
Yes. Yes, I put up signs. We used to have pizza stalls here, so there was clips out there on the lamppost, and say, pizza today over in the social building. And we had a lot of milk. We would buy like 7 pizzas from Papa John's, and we'd go pick it up, and they let us come from ours. We'd sell pizzas and Cokes, and sometimes Mary Jackson, I think, is an
Right.
excellent baker. Would make us cupcakes. We need more. We need to get
But
it ready.
everything's so delicious.
We need to get our own.
It's like a domino.
Right.
They don't have to do enough food and walk over and it just goes right by smoothly.
So they're going to the annual.
We're going all over the place.
Oh,
No,
That's
I'm
why I
gonna
asked
ask
you all for
semester. They're
suggestions.
going to April. They're gonna be
She
moving.
has
their
She knows you all want food.
Oh, really?
She's
Look, we're doing it
Candy,
here.
anything.
We're here.
She knows you want food. I told her about the food
You
truck.
dye your hair. Yeah. It smells like hello stranger. I was like, wait, you're in my
Well,
class.
that's what I thought.
I recognized the bag and I was just like, oh wait. It looks good. I like it. Did it look like blood on
I
it?
was dying, it was really bright. I was trying to.
Get through.
Yeah, that's what you said. That'd be nice.
I think that's one of the.
That'd be
This
nice.
year.
Yeah.
I was hoping maybe I could started it, and send it to Emily so that we can get it on.
Take a picture of a group of students, or take a picture of you and a group of students. Arm wrestling in the name of love.
In the name of
Well, I
love.
just like to get it on the website that we
I
have.
know.
We have-
Jesse, can you tweet something out? Can you tweet something out for Linda?
Great.
Can you take
I
some
wish I could
pictures?
stay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go over and tell Ray to come over.
I saw everyone else
Like, you can tell Ray
outside.
to come over here.
Well, I may, I've probably got a student waiting. I'm gonna have a student
Okay.
waiting, but when he's gone, yeah. There's a.
All right. See these lovely students? Do y'all care if we tweet you up? These little line of students, y'all care if we send you up on Twitter? Take a quick snap, okay. Snap away.
We're in the corner weirdo.
No, we're gonna get you all, don't worry.
No, no.
No, you don't
One
want to do.
day I didn't try. The one day.
You look incredibly studious over there, though. Look at all those books stacked out. So thank you.
Do y'all have questions for me? I have put some more sheets out here. You got your questions there.
Those are good. Aren't those good? You know, I'm addicted to the lemon things. Anything with lemon is out.
Oh, I do too. I love lemon.
I do too.
And then get some food.
All right.
What time is he supposed to be here? I got a call from the little lady who was on the air on purpose, but I didn't see him. I don't know if he's over there or not.
This is English number 2. English number 1 is the main. And they have 4 assignments, but not the same. Students are writing about an article. And some picture. They all have pieces in editorial. They have to refer to something. You don't have to agree with it, but you have to refer to something in the editorial. Because we have so many.
So what are y'all gonna do at the end of the semester? What's happening next semester? More classes, transfer,
Summer?
summer, what's up? You know what you're gonna major in? No? You're my favorite students, people who don't know for sure. They're so excited.
Okay, great.
most frequent major in your classes, Linda? Is it business, education, allied health?
I know more from the students that
From the classes,
more of them are taking the arts and business.
just general, undecided. So does anybody in here have a specific major, like you know you're gonna go into allied health or business or education? What's you? Business, you're gonna go U of L? What about you?
What do you mean?
So when you, one day, when you're not going to college anymore, you're gonna walk in and what are you gonna do for a living? Allied health area?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. What about you? So you know where you're gonna transfer to?
I don't know. I'm moving to California in May, so
Mid, southern, or northern California?
southern.
Okay. So like LA area, San Diego?
San Diego.
Well, you have the best transfer plan ever. I used to spend a lot of time in Northern California. It's beautiful. Just all of California. It's like another planet kind of, isn't it?
So you all have questions? But you might have a question, so you're not gonna write it down. I'll give you a copy of the editorial.
That's your ball.
It's just a good idea to write your question down. So it's kind of-
So I'm thinking, you know, it's your. All right, what about you?
Pretty good. You don't have.
Linda said I have to be here.
Oh, okay.
Linda said I have to be here. And she said I have to introduce you.
Oh, just do
Well, okay.
budget.
I have my thoughts prepared. And so, the tribute section, we'll have to edit the one now.
Yeah,
It talks about your magnanimous vision.
I'm gonna give you a different,
Well, perfect.
different copy. Maybe on a sugar high. I know who's gonna ask the question.
Different activities.
Are you good? Doing good. Good. Doing well. Hang on. I'm gonna chase you down. Just a different function. And I did back in August, so no choice. How are you doing?
And food.
Any snacks are for you. Yeah. No, that's all mine. That's none of that is for you. Dig in. Dig in. That's the old law enforcement. I wanted to see alternative based on that topic.
Lindy, just let us know when you want to start.
I can do it. Thank you so
My
much.
cue.
Not that you ever are.
Okay, welcome everyone. Today we're so glad you could join us in a conversation about our president's editorial that was recently in the newspaper to our president, Dr. Handy. So typically when you do that, you read a big long list about what their previous jobs were and all of that. But since you all have spent any time talking to you about that, I'm going to talk to you about culture. So the simplest definition of culture is the way we think and the way we act. So in order to change a culture, you have to have a couple of things. You have to have vision. You have to be able to see things not as they are, but how they could be. And you have to have courage. So you have to have courage that requires moving a heart, a mind, a group, an institution to a different, a little bit about Dr. Ty Handy, our president. He comes to us from Florida. That's his home state, it's where he was born. It was also where his last presidency happened. And he came here at a time at this college where we were in the midst of a cultural evolution. And during my year with him, working with him in the past year, and Linda and other faculty and staff here, we've been able to see those two things, vision and courage, the way you think and the way you act. So I've experienced Dr. Handy with his vision of seeing Jefferson as a different kind of institution with a different culture. And I think if you look at his editorials, you'll see that that's what he writes about. He sees things differently here in Louisville and at our college. And he has the courage to both speak truth to power, which is what it takes to write an editorial and put your name behind your words, right? And to listen. So I hope you do that today. I hope you speak truth to his power. I hope he speaks his truth to your power. And I hope everybody listens. So join me in welcoming Dr. Ty Handy.
Oh, so there's a camera.
There's a camera, yes.
So I have to be careful what I say. I can't be
Yes.
honest.
Yes.
There's a camera on. Oh, no. Can't be-
Everything can be edited.
That's okay, good deal, good deal. So, usually that's after the fact, right? So I am Ty Handy. I've been here for a year, but I have been a college president for, I guess it's 16 years now. In Indiana, in Vermont, in Florida, and now here. And she called Florida my home state, but I actually went to Western Kentucky University. My father's from the Glasgow, Bowling Green area, his family. And so I'm sort of torn as to what I call home. And my wife is from here in Louisville. And I've got a son that lives here in Louisville with his wife. So there's a lot of roots here or what have you. So I'm glad to be back in Kentucky. And I hope it's the last state I live in. That's the goal. So I gave you an extra case. The most recent one didn't really light your fire. Maybe it's occurred around the country. And I felt some of the dialogue that needed to happen wasn't happening. And I guess there's a couple of topics we ought to think about talking today, and I really want to have a conversation with you. One is why I picked that topic, and what I had to say about the topic, and writing an editorial and immigration policy. I wouldn't call myself an expert in law enforcement education either, although I have some experience in that area. But when you write an editorial, they think you're an expert. Okay, all of a sudden, I'm getting people calling me and asking me questions and wanting me to be involved in this, that, or the other, and I'm feeling a little bit out of my element because it's not my background. But in terms of this particular immigration article that I wrote, what I felt was being lost in the big conversation was the notion of the individual. And I saw that, or I see that every day here at the college when I talk to students about their success and about their hopes and what they want to do, and I see so many international students. This is the most diverse institution that I've been in my career. Vermont, for example, 2% African American population in Vermont. Okay? The whole state has 650,000 people in it, half the size of Louisville. Okay? Florida, a little bit more diverse, but where I was there was in the panhandle of Florida, right near an Air Force base. And so while there was a diversity of people, the Air Force culture and the Air Force values sort of permeated the community. So you didn't get, if you had diversity of thought, it was down underneath a little bit. Here, there's a lot more opportunity for give and take, a lot more opportunity for dialogue, and I really wanted to be part of the conversation. I try to write an editorial, I try to write 4 a year, that's my goal. I don't want to do too many that people get tired of hearing me, or the courier says it's that idiot again, writing or something. But I want to do one frequently enough, and quite frankly, I'm trying to position the college, not so much myself, but the college, as the voice of reason around educational issues. And I had a very influential Louisvillian named David Jones Jr., who I met when I first got here. He's the son of the founder of Humana, and he was on the JCPS Education Board. In fact, he may have been chair of the Education Board. And he sat down with me. I'd already written one, and he called to have a meeting with me. And I sat down with him, and he said, you know, at U of L, the president's in deep crisis. His name was Jim Ramsey. His voice is not being listened to in the community. Number two, Bellarmine Way. So they had a vacancy. And he said, we have a void for a voice for higher education. And I want you, as the new person here in the community, to step up and try to fill that void. And I told him I wanted to do that as long as I was filling it in a way that helped promote Jefferson, as opposed to promoting myself. And so each time I've written one of these, I've gone ahead and sent it to him to give him a chance to give me feedback. And all he's ever written back was, looks great. He's never given me any feedback, so he's not trying to tell me what to do. But that helped motivate me. I'd already decided to do it, but it took on an added importance because I hadn't viewed what I was writing as perhaps the voice of higher education in the Louisville community. I viewed it as my own little pet peeves. So the topics became more important. So after a couple of those shootings, it really became big national news, and we had some protests, and the Black Lives Matter movement and things of that sort. I wrote that one that I just passed out to you. 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call from out in California, a university out there, a criminal justice faculty member called me and asked to use the piece in her graduate level classes because she wanted to talk about to her students who are in criminal justice about the issue and about the role of education versus training. So it's 6 months later, it's still getting some traction. And then this most recent one, I really wanted to stay away from the firestorm. Right now, there's a lot of nervousness in the country. We sent a group, our Quick Recall Academic Skills Club. Any of y'all members of it here by any chance? So last year we were national champions for community colleges. This year we finished 6th in the country, sort of a brain game sort of format. You buzz in with the answer, and they ask these calculus questions and other things that I couldn't solve if I had in their head in 2 seconds, or what have you. We had a Hispanic team member. We were ranked number 3 in the country. And we had a Hispanic team member who was one of the key players on the team. He refused to go. He talked with his family and decided it was unsafe. This was up in Milwaukee, and we flew, and he wasn't going to fly. And we finished 6th in the country. And I haven't talked to the team leader, but I suspect that's one of the reasons. So we have these individuals who are vicariously, or more than vicariously, impacted by a way of thinking that's troublesome for a lot of them. By the same token, I watched JCPS declare themselves a sanctuary school or a sanctuary system. And immediately the governor comes out of Kentucky and starts attacking JCPS as a, I forget the phrase he used. Do you remember the phrase he used?
I try not to remember those.
Yeah, just basically said they were out of control, they weren't focusing on what was important, and they'd be better off focusing on improving themselves than these spurious sorts of things, is basically what he said. Watched U of L do it. They did the same thing. And what it occurred to me was, if you declare yourself that, I'm not sure what's different than just doing the things that you need to do to be compassionate and to help people, and not make a big deal about it. There's a fear, state, 16 of us, a fear right now that at some point, this notion of rounding the folks up to get them out of here may happen on our campuses. How are we going to react as a college to that sort of thing? I mean, if Homeland Security shows up and they want to do something, are we going to join arms and stand on the sidewalks and prevent them from coming in? And the reality is, what we're going to do is, if they have a warrant for a specific individual, then we'll let them on campus. If they don't have a warrant for a specific individual, we're going to tell them, sorry, you can't come on campus. And if they do anyways, then we'll pursue the courts to try to get that fixed. Now, I'm not going to get in a fight over it with somebody, but by the same token, that's all you really can do, whether you're a sanctuary school or not. So I tried to write an essay, an editorial, that walked the fine line between calling a lot of attention to ourselves, that might be negative attention, and speaking in support, while at the same time speaking in support of the diversity of our student body. And you see the data there, and I have some additional data that I didn't include. Probably the hardest thing about writing an editorial, and so far the Courier's let me get away with it each time, is they want fewer words. They want you to package it in a soundbite, basically. And when you're biting off a pretty big topic, it's impossible, or it's not impossible, you better be a really good writer to get it down to what you need it down to. And half words. The risk when you write an editorial like that is that they'll edit it themselves, and the point won't be made, or they'll take something out of context because they won't deliver the whole message. So you're running a risk. So far, they've given me a pass, and on both of those editorials, while they've changed a few things, they haven't, the editor didn't edit my editorial so much that it lost the important points I was trying to make. So, the topic of immigration. What are your, when you think about what's going on right now in the U.S., and you've got, and let's don't think about it in terms of Republican, Democrat, but you've got one extreme saying, we've got to keep our country safe. We've got to not let, we've got to make sure that people who are coming into our country are doing a couple things. One, they're not creating an unsafe environment for us. And two, hopefully they're bringing in a skill set that can plug into our economy and not only make their life better, but make society's life better. That's the idea. And when I say that, we tend to immediately think of a skill set such as somebody coming from India or China who's a doctor, and they're going to come in. And sure, that would be an obvious skill set, but there's jobs all the way up and down through the spectrum of our economy that are open. There are 30,000 positions open in Louisville today. 30,000 job openings in Louisville today. I would bet that 20% of them, they're hunting, but they can't find somebody to fill the job. So you've got that sort of extreme, I don't call it extreme, but that sort of position about keep America safe. And then you have a different call that says what made us wonderful, what made us great, is this ability to accommodate people from other places. The melting pot idea, that everybody comes in with different values, different culture, different systems, whether they wanted to be here or not, and they've shaped America into what it is today. And if we try to take that away from us, we'll lose something that has to do with sort of the culture and context of what it means to be American. And so you've got that extreme that says, I'm going to either extreme, but don't let anybody in, open the floodgates. And somewhere in between is where we have to land as a society. So that's the tone I wanted to sort of set. So with that, let me ask, how do you view the immigration circumstance in terms of immigration? You look like you want to say something, but you...
Well, my view is just that I'm kind of worried for people. It's kind of sad the fact that like they're being put through this process at this point in their lives when like it used to be like easier for them to come by, and like I don't know if there's that many examples for them to be put through this process at this point. You know what I mean? Yeah, there's some terrible things that go on like shootings and stuff like that, but is that really? I don't know if that's calls for the whole extreme process that you're talking about on the opposite end, like.
And your name is?
Katie.
Katie. So let me ask a question. Yesterday I saw in the paper, I'm going to show a reaction here that made me feel bad about myself. Yesterday in the paper I saw where the individual who, here in Louisville, who struck a couple of cars out of the road. This guy was driving with excessive speed and he plowed into the back of them and killed one person. A passenger in his car was killed, and they arrested him on murder charges, not first degree, but second degree, I think, murder.
And DUI.
And DUI and other things. And he had a Hispanic name. I don't remember his name. And my first reaction was, I wonder if he's here legally. That was my very first reaction, just because of the fella's name, right? And what I was thinking was, is this going to get him deported? Or perhaps if he was driving with a DUI, maybe he deserves to be deported. And I really had to catch myself and go, what am I doing here? Right? I'm saying somebody's name and I'm passing a judgment about their background and who they are. He could have been here for 5 generations, come up through Texas, right? And be every bit as American as I am. And yet I saw his name and made that reaction. And so, show of hands in here, if someone who's here illegally has committed a felony, okay, and felonies are any crime that gets you in prison for more than 1 year. So we tend to think of felonies as violent, and yes, there are violent felonies, but any crime that can get you a prison sentence for more than 1 year is a felony. Any crime that gets you a prison sentence or a jail sentence for 1 year or less is generally a missing point. There's a penalty for the sin. So if somebody commits a felony and they're not here with legal status, raise your hand if you think we ought to remove them from the country. Okay, it's okay. Nobody gets beat up for their hand. So almost everybody. Okay? So we agree that in situations, I don't call it extreme, but in situations where somebody has behaved inappropriately, and the way we measure that in our judicial system is inappropriately to the point where we're going to incarcerate them for quite a while, the invitation to stay ought to go away. Now, what about misdemeanors? Now, misdemeanors run the gamut, okay? Shoplifting, something that's, I think, less than $250 in Kentucky. I know my Florida law better than I know my Kentucky law. Shoplifting, something that's less than $250. So that would range from a candy bar to a cell phone, perhaps, okay? Can get you up to 1 year, generally, in prison. That's a misdemeanor. Simple assault, right? So you and I get in an argument, right? And at the end of the argument, I push you. I don't hit you. I just say, get the hell away from me. And I walk off. But I've touched you and pushed you. I've touched you without an invitation to touch you. Okay, now you look big enough that it probably wouldn't go to the cops. It would probably end up in me limping off or what have you. But anyways, that would be, generally that's going to be interpreted as a misdemeanor. Okay? Now, if I, pull out my ball bat or something like that, now we're up into the felony range. So something as simple as pushing somebody in anger or frustration is a misdemeanor. But some misdemeanors are actually pretty significant crimes. I mean, if you lost something, if something was stolen from you, and it costs $200, you would think that that was a... Raise your hand if you think someone who commits a misdemeanor ought to lose their opportunity.
Got a comment there.
Okay, so let me, so we lost, if we had 3/4 of the room to begin with, we lost over half that group here. Okay, there's still some who feel that way, but it's significantly less. Go ahead and add a comment.
In my country, they're an illegal alien or illegal immigrant. And they're committing a crime, misdemeanor or felony. They're gonna become a burden on the society. Why they need to be here? If they're gonna be in the prison system, jail system, send them back.
So do we know if there's evidence that if we look at the group of folks who are here illegally and we look at their criminal behavior, is there documented evidence that that element is more likely to engage in crime of everybody who's a U.S. citizen? Think about that for a second. So in other words, are we able to, at this point in time, say that illegal aliens are 3 times more likely to commit a felony as a group
No.
than... And maybe that data's out there, but I haven't seen it quoted anywhere.
In the research I'm doing for my paper,
Yeah.
in the 15 steps to better border security from Jenna McNeil, their border patrol arrested an illegal alien that attempted to cross the border in Yuma, Arizona. Doing the background check on him, he was arrested 23 times in the previous, and is discovered he had already had 8 years in prison and 13 years on probation.
So there, you got to my next question was going to be, we lost a lot of hands when we went from a felony to a misdemeanor. What if we had multiple misdemeanors over time? Now 23 gets to be extreme. Let me draw it back a little bit. And let's say they've done 5 times they've committed a misdemeanor. How many of you would view that as justification at that point in time to say, 3 strikes and you're out on this thing, or 5 strikes? Okay, and so we're back to pretty much the same group. So a felony, I better ask this question. Arrested of or convicted of? Convicted of, right? So they went through the process. So now be careful when you say that. What you're implying to me is you believe that individual deserves due process. They deserve it. They have rights. So the question is,
Illegal alien, they have no rights.
well, so is
How do they
the,
not have rights if
So-
they're a person and a human?
They're not citizens.
But they're on American soil and they're trying to find.
so is the U.S. Bill of Rights a guarantee to citizens?
Repeat that in.
Is the U.S. Bill of Rights, and I'm not a political scientist, is the U.S. Bill of Rights only to all citizens in this country?
Dr. Handy, you have a comment holding over here.
Okay, yeah, so let's go ahead and make a comment.
I'll just agree to what he said,
Uh-huh.
that like, if you're here illegally, then you should be in behavior and not come here and start trouble.
So one attorney has made a national call, and basically he said to all people who are here illegally, don't get a speeding ticket. Don't do anything that would cause attention to your name. Lay low. Avoid it. His advice is step away from it. That's his advice.
I have a question about it, Candy, because I genuinely don't know the answer to this. If you come into the country, you're not a citizen, and you migrate to the country, and you don't go through our established procedures, is that a felony or a misdemeanor? I don't know that, do you? I mean, I don't know.
I don't know the answer to
what
that.
that is.
And I'm not sure that we would actually convict you of anything. But
Because the deportation
But we would probably
process
deport you. We would begin
is in
deportation
lieu
hearings.
of- okay.
And that doesn't give you a convict, I mean, it's gonna go on the
Right.
record in case you
Right.
come back,
Okay.
or in case you want to come
I was
back.
just
Now, we
thinking-
tend to think of illegal aliens as people who have found a trick mechanism to get into the country. A tunnel, a passage in the late at night, okay? Most of the illegal aliens that I've ever met in my life, quite frankly, were college students who came here with a student visa, who finished their work. Now they had a chance to go back home and earn $300 a month or whatever, or they could stay here and work and earn 5 times that, $1,500 a month. But if they can get a job, they choose to vie to the U.S. or what have you, when in fact they're not a student, they're working. I don't know what proportion of illegal aliens start out with that sort of migration pattern, but I suspect it's pretty high. Okay?
And is that because the process to get switched from like a student visa to a work visa, is that like a difficult process? Or is it just
Very,
one visa?
very, very cumbersome
Okay.
process. So a lot of bureaucracy, and you feel like, my impression, and I've really only had one conversation with a person like this, but you feel like you don't control your own life. Somebody else before I make him wait again, but I want to come back to that with a specific story about a young lady from Italy that I worked with at my last school. Yes?
I just look at Amazon over in Indiana, and there was a whole lot of immigrants that work there too.
And now, my understanding of Amazon is they're pretty careful, though, about vetting those individually, right? Or are you aware that some were illegal?
I mean, I don't know, I don't
Sure.
judge them, but
Okay.
I'm pretty sure some
So, but of course, you know, what the employer's duty is to verify through a social security card or something. So if you're
The place I
able
worked
to.
at, we used the temporary service,
Mhm.
and they were supposed around time for
Peak.
income tax time, things like that. They would get a whole new shipment of people.
Sure,
Yeah,
Become
sure.
yes, is very extreme about that. One of my friends, he's an immigrant from Mexico, and he was just about to expire. But it was like weeks, and they actually made him go get it before he could come back. He wasn't able to come back for months because of it.
So there's this bureaucratic nightmare that you have to go through. It can be very problematic. And you're not guaranteed success. So you go through the process, when you go to work, you're guaranteed success, at least for a little while, right? So you've got some people who are well-intentioned. Oh, plus, we have a history as a country in the past of if you've been here long enough and you've towed the line and done what you need to do and paid taxes and the whole shebang, we'll find a way to help you stay. In other words, okay, except those that we have broken the law or what have you. So it has in the past proven to be a right. Let me go to this story about a young lady from Italy. So a young lady appears in my office. She is a 3.95 GPA, majoring in biology at the community college I was at in Florida. She came here as a 10th grader on the foreign exchange student program. She lived with a family. She's from Italy. Lived with a family there in the area. Stayed her 10th grade year. Decided she liked it real well, and applied for a student visa, and got the student visa. So she finished her high school with this family, and then came to us at the community college, and then had gone on to Florida State University. Now it's time to go to med school. Okay? She wants to half dozen different med schools around the country, and none of them will take her because U.S. med schools, let me be careful, what she says to me is that you have a U.S. citizenship or a green card in order to accept you. They do not want to be preparing students for medicine who are going to live in another country. We got our own demand. Okay, does that make sense? So that's her challenge. She'd gone to an immigration attorney, and the immigration attorney, who deserved to be taken out behind the woodshed and whooped, or whatever, for what he said, go marry an American. That was his legal advice. I immediately put her in touch with my son. I'm not joking. I put her in touch with him for a different reason, because what I realized in her conversation, I asked her where she'd applied. She'd applied to state schools. I said, I can't believe that's true everywhere. You need to look at some private medical schools. So one of them was University of Chicago, which is where my son went to school, so I connected her with him. I think she's at U Chicago right now, I believe. Private schools didn't have that mandate. But if you were at a state school, right, you had to figure a way to get around U.S. immigration policy in order to pursue.
So she actually went and married an American?
She did not marry, well, I don't know if she, as far as I know, she hasn't married anybody, okay? This was about 3 years ago or so. But I actually because my son, who had just finished up at U Chicago, she and he started emailing exchanges about stuff, and it got broader than just about the Chicago area. And I thought, oh no, I'm going to help this happen for this person who, that wasn't my intent, but no, he married somebody else. That didn't happen. So I guess what I'm trying to show are a couple of stories that try to humanize the problem a little bit, because you have people across the entire spectrum of immigration, just like you have people across the entire spectrum of our population. All right? And I don't know, I have not seen the data that tells me that this group deserves to be singled out because of a propensity to draw us down as a society. What I see is an average GPA here at Jefferson for immigrant students that is higher than the average GPA for our regular students, okay, or our non-immigrant students. What I see is a higher success rate for those students. When I get complaints from immigrant students, not very often, but occasionally, and their top complaint is, you ready for this? Maybe you know this. Faculty members are not professional. Not because faculty members are not professional, but because faculty members from their country behave differently. Right? What you say is gospel. Okay? There's no questioning the teacher. The teacher is always right. Right? And they get frustrated because of a different culture we have here that encourages dialogue, that gives you some academic freedom, just like it gives the faculty member some academic freedom. That's one of the things we value in higher education, is this hopefully civil discourse back and forth. Happen professional sort of behavior. Think about that. They're serious about their studies. And mainly, well, I don't know mainly, but probably because in the country they came for, maybe 1 out of every 20 high school graduates got the chance decision as they're coming out of high school or whatever, what they want to do. There, it's a very elite opportunity for folks. China, students from China have a lot of that same mindset about themselves. So when I come in on a Friday to class and I'm wearing blue jeans, they view that as me drawing down the profession, right? So my picture of the immigrants, it's slanted, because what I see primarily are those who not only have come here, but they've decided they're going to live the American dream, and that dream is going to best be achieved through getting an education. And they're right. You were going to say something else, Katie?
Oh, I was going to say, that's what I was thinking with that, like, culture is like, it's something that you like adapt to and like surround yourself around and like just change. But with being like from a human perspective, like, we're all just striving to do one thing, that's to be more educated, and that's to make our lives better and be happy and live in like a united way, as like the United States, as you would think it would be, but with all this commotion, it's just, it really blows my mind.
So there's a quote that hangs in the lobby of my building downtown, or what have you. It's on a stanchion there. And every time I come in the door, I see it. It's from Barbara. She's a congresswoman from Texas. I'm not gonna, is it Baxter? No. Boxer. Is it Boxer? I think it's Barbara Boxer. Anyway, she's a U.S. congresswoman, and she said, success in this society and to valuing diversity is tolerance, cannot be achieved. I'm paraphrasing. The key word I use is tolerance. And every time I see that word, I cringe. My kids' bad behavior at a restaurant. I didn't condone it. I didn't like it when they were growing up, but I tolerated it, right? I tolerate my dog when he makes a mistake on the floor in the living room, when he should have been letting me know he needed to go outside. I tolerated it. And every time I see that word, I think, this isn't really about us tolerating something, okay? We don't have a perspective of diversity if all we do is tolerate that you're different than I am, right? And if you're tolerating me, then I'm tolerating you, haven't we? Right? And so every time I see that quote, I think, man, there's got to be a better phrase than tolerating something. It's a little more embracing. I also see, from where I lived in my last 2 states, in Vermont, okay, lily white Vermont, and where I was in this very militarily influenced neck of the woods in Florida. And I come here, and I see all the different choices I have as a citizen. I live in Old Louisville, by the way. I live on 3rd Street, 2 blocks from U of L. Okay, I told my wife, if we're moving back to the area, we're moving here, we're gonna live right where the action is. Okay? And so I live 2 blocks from U of L, and I see this opportunity for engagement that I would never have had in either Vermont or Florida. And it's sort of eye-opening, and we were nervous about moving. You know, we had a gunshot go off in our front yard. Okay, I mean, the cops are out there with their flashlights at 3 in the morning, walking through our front yard looking for the shell casing. Okay, so we're right down there where there can be some interesting times, or what have you. And yet the opportunity for advancement is so much greater here than the same old, every day, where I was before. And so I'm sort of learning this on the fly. Diversity, or what have you, embracing the differences. So that quote always jumps out at me. If you're ever in the Broadway building and you see that quote, you know, although I keep saying to myself, I'm going to take it down.
That was it from Barbara Jordan.
Barbara Jordan,
She was
that's
the
it.
first
U.S.
woman of color to be elected.
U.S.
in the
Congresswoman,
South.
U.S. Congresswoman from Texas.
Yes.
Yes, and the word tolerance bothers me, okay? So I can understand us saying, we're not going to tolerate a visitor here committing. We're going to say, it's the same standard. We just can't send them home, we got to send them to prison, right? So I've got my arms around that without any trouble. I struggle with the misdemeanor point a little bit. But I do recognize where, if you have a pattern of behavior, right, that's got to be addressed, right? I had somebody at one of my other schools, because we were having a little issue and I was handling it, and people didn't like the fact that I didn't just let it go. And this faculty member came to me and said, Ty, you're doing the right thing. There are natural and logical. Now think about that for a minute. There are natural and logical. I'm not doing anything wrong by holding the rules up to somebody and saying you can't do that, right? It's their behavior that caused the problem in the first place. And there are natural and logical consequences for our behavior. And that makes some sense to me, doesn't it? Yes? Yeah. Oh, go ahead, no.
Continue.
What's that?
Continue.
Okay, so I see that piece. But I also see that balancing side of how rich our community is by having this plethora of people's opinions and values. You know?
I have to throw in a science fiction reference. For those of you who are Star Trek fans, the whole concept of infinite diversity and infinite combinations. So I'm an anthropologist, so I'm all about the things you're talking about. It's our diversity that gives us strength.
So I made a point in the article that I wasn't able to flesh out as fully as I wanted to flesh it out. And it's an economic point. I think people approach this topic oftentimes from their value system, how they feel, or their emotions, or their faith, their religion, or what have you. And that sometimes gets in the way of thinking through the big picture. And so I thought I was taking a risk and I might anger some people because I was turning a societal issue, a cultural issue, into a dollars and cents thing. But I try to take it from an economic point of view, where in economics, the best economic system is an efficient economic system, one that allocates its resources in the smartest way possible. So think about trade agreements that we have with Mexico and Canada, NAFTA, or what. Thought about that. Trump has shared his and others, but the argument is resources are going to be deployed where they are best and most effectively used. And so if something can be produced in Mexico at a lower cost that we can consume, and we go buy it from Mexico, we've not only helped Mexico, we've helped ourselves, because we've spent less of our resources for that good, and more is available for the goods that we can produce locally or in the country. So if we're big on high-tech stuff here, right, if Dell computers is what we do best, and if assembling automobiles is what they do best, we're better off letting the resources flow wherever they need to flow so that both get maximized. Why spend extra money, okay, on a car that you don't need to? And why spend, or get inferior quality because another country is producing something that we could have done better? And so there's this economic argument that we should deploy our resources as efficiently as possible. The flip side to that means, and I have one right now for dean in charge of going out to business and industry and coordinating training for employees. If I say to myself, I don't want a woman in that job, right? I think that's a job that a man should have, or what have you, okay? And I base my decision on that value, that perception, all right? And actually, a woman in the pool was the better candidate for the job. Have I not done the exact same thing I just talked about between Mexico and the U.S.? I've just done it on a smaller scale. And I've harmed the efficiency of the college, right? And all the employers who use training from us didn't get the best training they possibly could have because I didn't put the best possible person out there to help them. And I've just simplified a very emotional sort of concept into an economic concept that when we're prejudiced against somebody, okay, if we use anything other than who's best for the job in making a decision like that, they have a pretty specific harm. But the argument being when we have an immigrant who, for whatever prejudicial reason, we decide we're not going to employ them effectively in our society, for whatever reason, we've harmed our economic performance as a society because that may have been the best person for that job. React to that. What do you think?
I think it goes back to the example of, you talked about the Italian girl who didn't get accepted into those colleges, the fact that she had such a great GPA and everything. They're denying such a great student in order, like, she could have learned and developed new ideas and different added values to their colleges, but they denied her of that, so I feel like that's a prime example.
Well, and I probably didn't complete the story there entirely because I asked her, well, if you get your MD, will you go back to Italy? Oh, no, that is not home. This is home. I am staying here. Okay? Yeah, so her intent, she hadn't made it through the bureaucratic process. You can't get a work visa. Guess what? You can't get a work visa easily until you're basically working. You need to be employer sponsored while you're in med school. Right? And so you got these issues. And so the public, it's sort of a catch-22. If you ever want to read a sort of a humorous book, Joseph Keller, Catch-22. It's a good read, okay? My wife thought I was weird because about every 10 pages I'd read it at night, I'd start laughing about something, and she thought that, how can you read a book at night in bed or whatever and laugh or what have you? But anyways, the Catch-22 idea is that you can't get a green card for work until you're working and have an employer sponsorship, but you can't get there until you get the education you need. You're in a box. Right? You can't, there's no way out. There's no way to make the right choice or what have you that gets you there. And that's sort of what she was in. And it's a bureaucratic nightmare. And I won't tell you anything more about the book, but it's a good read. Yeah. Other questions? Yes?
I think this last political cycle threw a big red flag up with the federal government and the visa cycle. We don't even know how many people are in the United States on visas.
So it's probably been a problem since the early 80s. Okay, probably, you know, but I think I'm going to say it's been 2 electorates. So I think there was a perception, right or wrong, that President Obama was soft on this. And what we're starting to see now coming out with the data is that he really wasn't very soft on this. Okay, he was pretty darn.
He deported quite a few.
Absolutely, okay, more so than predecessors. In fact, I think softer on this than. But there's this perception, right or wrong, maybe colored by our prejudices or what have you, that he was soft, and that Trump's going to be hard on this, right? I have a hard time separating the real Trump from the tweeting Trump. Okay, so I don't know yet if he's going to be harder than Barack Obama was. He certainly seems to be on the same path in terms of that. But I think you're right. And so it's been heightened in front of us, along with this phrase that I think really causes us to think about what makes America great. Because he's saying, let's make America great again. And so you got that phrase sitting over here, and then you have this behavior, and you've got some people who say, yes, our safety is paramount, it's the most important thing, and we ought to deport everybody who's not here legally. And I understand that. If we were successful doing it, I also know exactly what it would do to our economy. Okay? We have an immigrant-dependent economy, like it or not. We have an immigrant-dependent economy, and our quality of life will drop dramatically if we don't have immigrant populations coming in, filling jobs all along the educational spectrum, from the most menial tasks, right? You know, tending our gardens or what have you, to the most high level, to brain surgeons. Okay? Go look through the U of L directory of physicians and find me a neurologist with an American sounding name. Okay? And there might be 20 in Louisville and 2 or 3 will have that name. Most of them won't. Okay? So it's across the entire spectrum of employment. So that's the economic argument I was trying to take. And in part because I wanted to try to pull the emotion piece out of the argument. I didn't want to call attention to the president, not hard, but one of the challenging things about being the president is no matter what I say, it's never my own opinion. People think I'm speaking, actually probably don't have as much freedom of speech as anybody else in this room. It's self-imposed, okay? I mean, you know, we've got a president of the U.S. who doesn't let it bother him. I feel obligated to be a lot more careful how I choose my words because I can harm the college, not just harm myself. And so that's an interesting, I find that to be an interesting dynamic. And so usually when I first write one of these, it's a little more energetic. It's got a little more oomph to it. It's got some phrase words that I probably should pull because they're incendiary just a little bit. Okay, and I got to tone them down so that I don't step across that line or what have you. Well, what time do we finish? 1:50. Okay. So you've got one on law enforcement there in front of you, and you probably haven't read it yet or anything like that. This one's more interesting because I spent 4 years as a deputy. So in my last school, it was the first school I'd been at that had a law enforcement academy. And they kept wanting to talk to me about law enforcement again. My father was a firefighter. My sister was a customs agent, and then a U.S. federal fish and wildlife agent. And I told my father, I have a brother-in-law who's a Chicago police officer. Didn't go into public service. I went into education instead. So here we have this program, and they keep wanting to get me involved and so forth and so on. And so ultimately I said, okay, I'm not just going to learn about the program, I'm going to go through it. So I did 525 hours, clock hours, of law enforcement training, which wasn't the full course, but it was enough to get fully sworn. So carried a gun, you know, had arrest powers, fully sworn as a deputy sheriff. Only thing is I did it voluntarily, I didn't get paid for it. And so here I was. So if you've ever, Redneck Riviera, the beaches of Walton, if you've ever Destin and all that area, it's a beautiful area. On the beach, very high end, you know, Jerry Jones, the owner of the Huckabee there, and that's on the coast. And then inland, it's very rural. Okay, I mean, you know, lots of meth dealing and so forth and so on. And so I live in Okaloosa County, which is Fort Walton Beach and so forth and so on. It's sort of a humorous story here. When I finished, both counties wanted me to work for them because they thought, you know, college president, the sheriff. Sheriff's an elected position down there. So they, and I had one of the other cops pull me aside and say, "You need to go to Walton County." And he was an Okaloosa County sheriff's deputy. I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you never party where you police." Now think about that for a minute. In other words, I live in Okaloosa County. If I ever did anything stupid, if I had one drink too many, or something of that sort, and it was embarrassing, or something, you want to separate the two. And I thought, after I thought about it, first I laughed about it, and then I thought about it, he's right. So I went and worked for Walton County. And I encountered some great people who, every one of them, to a person, cared about serving the community. Right? But their training, to me, just kept getting in the way. They were trained that every single traffic stop you make, the one that you're not prepared for violence is the one where the violence is going to happen. Right? If you're not heightened at every moment when that emergency occurs, you won't be ready and you will be dead. And that's the substance of the training. Why? because it does happen. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. And so I was very concerned that we trained our law. So here's anything that goes different in a traffic stop, you need to be prepared to draw your weapon, to handle it. I mean, that's what they teach you. So let's take it to its logical extreme. You stop a car doing 105 miles an hour in a 45 mile an hour zone. Is that an unusual stop? Right? Is it surprising then with that training that you would get out of your car really ready to handle what needs to happen? Right? Let's take it to another extreme. You're in a very white neighborhood, and a young African-American male is driving through the neighborhood, and a taillight's out. Right? Now you have a reason to stop. Should you be just as heightened in that scenario? It's not the standard, right? It's not the, you're thinking, well, why is that person here? Right? So now you start to think, they're talking about profiling. Now you start to get a sense of the text and the contextualization of what we're having to do. So every time we stop somebody, I always rode with another officer. And my job was backup, basically, unless I was riding with K-9, in which the K-9 officer was the backup, and I was the lead person, or what have you. And there wasn't a single stop. I never put my hand on my whip, but I was ready to go to my weapon immediately, because that's how I was trained. Isn't any, oh, and by the way, the next piece of training they give you is never draw your weapon unless you intend to use it. Threaten with it. Okay, you'd be fired from the sheriff's department if you fired up into the air. You just don't do that, okay? When you draw your weapon, it is to be for the intent of using it, right? So if you tell me every stop I make, I need to be ready, right? And anything out of the ordinary, I need to be ready to react. And the second thing you train me with, hours and hours of training, is when you draw your weapon, be ready to use it. Is it surprising that in a few circumstances, not very many, but in a few, count them on 2 hands probably, right? Somebody draws their weapon because it's unusual, and they use it because their training taught them to use it, not because it really needed to be used. Right? That's the problem that I saw in this one, training versus education. Whereas in an educational environment, yeah, I need to have that heightened sense of anxiety whenever I make a stop. I need to be in the moment and prepared. But I need to think of circumstances, right? The whole picture, right? Before I go drawing a weapon or using it or anything of that sort. I need to have enough education to take it from my training and to pursue, not be so rash. College education it is an important part of being an effective law enforcement officer. And so at least 2 years, maybe 4 years, right? Cost us a lot because we'd have to pay more for those officers. But they would have a better opportunity to think in the moment as opposed to just fall back on their training. Katie, you were going to say something?
Oh, well, I was just going to mention the fact that, like, as I was growing up, like, it never used to be, like, just even watching cops, like, again, it's silly to say, but, like, the tactics they would use, like, versus now is just so much different. Like, they tackle people and actually use physical force, and now the first instinct they use in their training is to grab their guns and shoot. So I just find that, like, really interesting.
So when I was in Vermont, they had, I wasn't law enforcement then, but they had tased somebody, and the individual died. Not from the taser, but it was a complication. They already had some problems and things of that sort. So everybody wanted to blame the taser.
Yeah.
So the State House, basically, they were going to outlaw tasers. You cannot use tasers. What's the argument that you can't use tasers on somebody? It's less than lethal force, right? What you've done is you've taken away one of my options not to shoot somebody, right? I'd rather have tasers and no guns if I can get away with it, or what have you, because the problem with a taser is it does more than that. And luckily, some rational thought won out in the very end, but they were very, very close to that sort of thing. So we get to the point where, in law enforcement, you're trained to think, or you're trained in a fashion so that complex thought doesn't enter it, right? In other words, if I have to draw, I'm probably in a race because they're drawing too. So if I pause to think it through, yeah, I'll have the more enlightened viewpoint, but I'll be dead. Right? I got to react immediately. Now let's take it back to this, that all illegal immigrants are bad, are threatening us. Okay? And so the way the rhetoric is occurring is sort of giving us the same sort of training that I'm saying cops get in terms of using their gun. Whole thing, there are immigrants who can be of value to us, and we get that value. It's good for them and it's good for us. And there are immigrants who aren't, and we ought to be figuring out how to figure that out and let them be a burden to a different community, not ours. So I want to try to tie the two together just a little bit at the very end here, by saying, to some extent, the rhetoric that we're hearing today is training, whether they perceive it that way or not. Does that make sense? What do you think? So my encouragement is, when you read an editorial, or when you hear, it's so hard with these tweets, 144 letters, you can't tell what anybody needs, right? There's no way to put a context to your comments on this. So I don't even look at Twitter, okay? Because I just can't have a rational dialogue with anybody with that limitation on it. But when you see these things, try to think about them really deeply. You may end up in the same place in your thinking. That's okay. But try to think about it much more deeply, because generally somebody is using their words, I'm going to say, in an attempt to train you to think a certain way. They want you to think like they do. And so they're going to try to package that but if you think it through, you might come to a different conclusion. You might. Okay?
In most ways, if you think logically, take emotion out of it. If you think things logically, then you can base all your thinking on fact.
And that's hard to do. In fact, it's almost impossible.
So you take it down to dollars and you can do things logically.
That's my effort to take it away from the emotion or what have you. Other comments? Now, one other thing I want to say is there's nothing in an editorial that I write that you couldn't write too. The reason the Courier-Journal runs my editorial and not yours is because, why?
You gotta fight.
First of all, I submitted one. Okay? First of all, I wanted my voice to be heard. So few students submit an editorial that was important to you. They would want to run it because that would be as important to them as the president. Okay? Perhaps because they don't get. So yeah, do I get a little bit of a, I probably get quicker read and a little bit of a pass because I'm the president or what have you. Okay? But I also don't think they are flooded with editorials that they would like to run or what have you. So in a topic, there's also freedom of reaction to that speech, right? So you got to live with what you say, okay? And if you said it wrong, there may be a price to pay for it. Doesn't mean there's no consequence. There are natural and logical consequences for everything we do. But you can do the same thing. And I suspect, unless 50 of you did it, the Courier and other places to put this stuff are going to treat you the same way because they don't get that very much. So pick your battle carefully, but go ahead and do it because they'd like to
Shape the way you think. We have tweeted out about Dr. Handy here today. We've been tweeting while he's talking.
We are attacking tweeting.
So I encourage you, when you see that, like on our webpage, if you have a comment, you can always respond to those tweets that we send out to you.
So when you write things on our webpage or by tweet about Jefferson, we have somebody who reads all those. And if it's a very positive comment or it's a negative comment, I see it. I do know of it. I don't know. Thus and so said this. I get the gist of what the frustration is. Well, you got me in front of you for a couple minutes. Any other questions or anything else you wanted to ask about? No? Well, I enjoyed talking to you. Oh, yeah. part of being in my role, you end up on this board and that board, and a lot of them are workforce boards and things of that sort. And one of the things that's presented at every board meeting in Kentuckiana Works is the number of unfilled jobs in Louisville. And since I've been here, it's gone from 26,000 to 30,000 positions. Okay? What's interesting about it is that the positions that are unfilled in Louisville right now require some college education. Okay, they are not, you don't need a 4-year degree, okay, but some level of college education is required. And if you're willing to do work in some of the technical fields and put your college education, towards some of the technical areas, the salaries are really pretty doggone amazing. Okay, in fact, I'm surprised our faculty don't go take those jobs. Or maybe, I don't know, quality of life issues there. But for example, let's take a very blue-collar position like welding. So we run a welding program. We got welding certificates. They take about a year to complete the welding certificate. Base pay for a welder coming out is about $45,000 a year. Okay, that sounds okay. Welders, because there's problems getting enough welders, average pay for a welder is well over $60,000 a year. Now they're earning their pay. Okay, it's tough work. Go spend an afternoon at Jeff Boat watching working on building what do they call those? A barge, and you'll know it's not easy work. Okay,
When it's 98 degrees.
especially or 20.
Below zero.
Yeah, exactly. So you got that extreme, but then you have advanced manufacturing, which requires some level of math. Doesn't require calculus. You've got to be pretty good with numbers. You've got to understand computers and programming. Those jobs start at about $45,000 a year with a 2-year degree. There's over 1,000 of them in advanced manufacturing available right now. The average pay after about 5 years is approaching $100,000. And they manufacture about this. It's cartons of 2-liter Coke or what have you. You're going to ship it somewhere. You don't want it to fall over. So you got this machine that has saran wrap on it that's about this tall, a roll of saran, and they wrap the crate with it 4 or 5 times to hold everything together, and then it cuts it off and they load it on the truck and they take it. That's what he manufactures, is the equipment that does that. 400 employees for the employees working at that location. And he refuses to grow the business here because he can't find the employees. So he has another plant in the Netherlands, does the same thing in the Netherlands. He has the workforce available there. So all his growth, all his new production lines, everything are happening over in the Netherlands because he can't find employees here. And you take a person who takes a job like that and has that opportunity, for every 10 of those jobs that are created in a manufacturing environment, you get about 2 jobs in the rest of the community to support those. Right? So we're harming ourselves because we have all these jobs available and we aren't creating the workforce to fill them. So I would just encourage you, Kentuckiana Works has a web page that you can go to that you key in jobs, and it tells you how many openings are available in those areas in Louisville today and what the average salary is for those positions. Don't take it as gospel, because if you key in welder, it comes up with something like $26,000 a year. And that's because they have so many welding openings. They're hiring folks at minimum wage, calling them welders, and then training them over time. Okay? So all those folks' wage from that. So you can't look at, but anyways, so you can put in veterinarian, English teacher, whatever you want. 1,500 jobs in IT right now. Over 1,500 positions in information technology. Paying pretty doggone good wages for whatever. That's a job you can do from home. Anna and Kindred Healthcare and others, how are they filling their IT jobs in many ways right now? They're hiring people from Cincinnati, from Indianapolis, and they're letting them work from home. Right? That job could be in this community. You could be doing that job, and it could be helping the community be stronger. And instead, we don't have the workers, so it's being outsourced. Not to Mexico necessarily, or India, but it's being outsourced to another community. So that's the challenge. Is most of them require a college degree. And there'll be a tab on there for their career website. I can't give the actual name of the website, but there's a tab to go to, and they just opened it up about 3 months ago. And it's the first time I've been anywhere where I could get local data on trend, or nurses, or what have you. I can see the local trend. Nursing, allied health, we got purchased an immigrant class of students coming into the U.S. who may have been a nurse. So they get a job at the hospital in housekeeping. It's close to what they were doing. It's close to what they love. They're probably doing their work, looking over the shoulder of the nurse and thinking, I can do that with that person, or what have you. But we can't translate their transcript into what they need. And so Baptist Hospitals checked all of its non-nursing employees and realizes it has plenty of them with nursing credentials. So they want us to take this population of immigrants, students, people who are here legally, or what have you, and to work with giving them what they need so they get the nursing credentials, because they need more nurses. They don't need more housekeepers. Lucian's trying to fix them. I said Baptist Hospital and I'm wrong. It's Kentucky 1. Kentucky 1 is the one who wants to do that. Baptist can't go to another reason. But there's a lot of allied health, right, as a population. We're nominating. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Hard to talk with 2 bowls of candy. So she came. Okay, then is she work for us? No. Have you met Linda? Linda LaPinta over in Spalding? She's in charge of the higher ed program. She was a faculty member at E-Town. She wrote a book, Cooking with Kentucky Writers. Kentucky Writers. I go see if she's in there. Their favorite recipes and stories around those recipes.
She shares it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And I read that, so I'll read it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Your name is? Very sure. Harry? Harry. Nice to meet you. Katie, I wasn't trying to pick on you there.
No, I just try to continue the conversation like that, so. Glad you're able to come.
Better. So,
Glad I came. It's always something, I had like that big, I had like that, you know, twist in my heart. My sister, she's actually moved to Australia a year. Very yummy. Man, I'm telling you.
yeah. I'll tell you what I like. That's my phrase. I like chocolate-less chocolate chip cookies. In other words,
You like the books?
yeah, just get rid of the chocolate. I just
We have a sign-in sheet.
Yeah.
This is pretty good right here.
I'm sure it is.
I don't know what that is, but.
It's oatmeal.
It doesn't taste like any
Well,
oatmeal.
that was oatmeal, that was chocolate.
It tastes incredible. It tastes like some weird.
Patty said it's kind of
It's
buttery.
like some snickerdoodle magic.
That's because it has no butter in it. You don't know what you're getting when you buy the store.
Butter and sugar.
Shortly, I'm going to stay for
Write
this.
a copy, well, here's.
I'm hoping I don't have to, but Linda's,
You're making me think you don't have a job there.
no, it's her orders right now. Maybe she will relieve me.
Plenty of discussion, you've heard on this.
I know I was on my phone last night, I was tweeting, so I didn't try to think right
Oh, I
now.
did you?
Did you get some food?
Yeah, try that one out. I thought it was hysterical, it's like, we're tweeting like mad over here. And you're going down the tour.
Put some in that.
I know, I was tweeting.
My gift name was
We don't always have food around.
I know, I was just some food. I enjoyed that part of it.
But I can name you a half dozen who lost their job. So I don't. One bad
Pretty
person,
good.
innocent, or, whatever. And your brother.
Social media is
It's one of the things we don't do well in teaching our students, because more and more transfer schools are looking at your social media account and determining the level of scholarship, or even if they want you there. So,
I don't, that wouldn't plan to run all the summer. He just wants to put everything out there.
It's like that's what
Yes, it's something
I'm.
that,
Then he has a sense of humor.
Dr. Handy.
it doesn't always come across, and like.
Dr. Handy said if I stay, he thinks that he's gonna fire me.
It's hard to.
It's sorry, I just said, I'm to wonder how much we're working with.
That's why when I got
Like, he's gonna assign some extra duties to me.
I unlisted a phone call.
So I told him that I work for you, and then,
Sometimes you come across as a
I'm dismissed.
They sent a short email.
Are you okay with that?
Hurry.
So,
So,
She wants me to stand and introduce you.
and then just,
would you care for a cookie or a brownie?
Did you pay for international food?
Those lovely students. We're excited.
it's a different one, I knew a few months before.
We had a reunion in my house.
You are.
We need to.
Abigail, I'm not gonna pretend that I'll remember your name. I'm sorry.
I'll meet you in the office and we'll head over. Mary.
And two rooms.
Hi.
I still have a little birthday at the house. If you know anybody likes.
Hello, and your name is? Magna, I'm Ty, nice to meet you. Just a different one than I wrote on
You're
for
giving
college.
away all your goodies, you're so generous.
Don't give it all away. I'll be there Wednesday night.
You all put it all in that big freezer waiting in your office, in your classroom, and see how.
It's for Taz, he's go, Epic's actually gonna pay for him to go through.
I'm determined to get that thing out of there, Amy. It kills everybody. It's gone. It's gotta be gone by the end of this year.
Won't be able to get you a
I have a little mission for this year. This has been discussed since why is it taking us like January?
It's not gonna
No,
be
that's not true. They're simply moving it down, all they're doing. They're simply moving it down. So, I think we'll be out of
Yeah. Good. Well, then I want you to be making those decisions.
Is it big enough for me to speak it?
my office is 79 degrees.
But they're from other countries.
How are you doing?
My allergies are so bad, I can't open the windows up and not get, you know what I mean?
We're talking.
Yeah, so,
I saw you do yesterday.
I don't know how hot it is in your building.
I think you're supposed to sign in.
All right, well, I would like to stay for the next one, but we're not seeing any.
I did, and you know, you're one of the few that can just walk back.
Well, I'm working I got them, you said come Thursday, and I was at 2 days.
I know you are.
So I'm working through them.
I'm telling you, that it's a huge pile to read. I'm sorry, but you know.
And they don't ask me. And you might bring the question unless he starts talking, because he actually brought a second editorial too.
You know, it's just the exact reaction that you would anticipate.
We give you these. It's a different one.
Thank you. Well, there you go. You did it.
I already gave you that. Did I give you one of these already?
Thank you.
We'll give you one of these, don't forget to sign in.
I just did.
I had a guide in the front, the ones that I think of that. came on, went down the parking over here.
We're gonna talk some more about our paper. Well, you're working on your paper, just email me your questions. Oh, that's right, you're spelling the word. That's right. Okay, well, have a great, great Saturday, and I'll see you.
Well, I have those are like from the Julia Child oven of Southwest, Amy Sprinkles. Amy Sprinkles.
Where are you sitting?
I'm here in the front row.
Oh, thank you. You're such a good I know.
I'm just telling you.
This is why just needs to be a lot.
Oh, no, I'm gonna, this will take like 5 minutes.
What's that? Listen to it?
Yeah.
I'm sure I have, I'm sure I have. What happened? I know, I Well, this is a different one. This is from earlier, I gave you. I give you this. You signed it or not? You signed, well, I'm like. So this is going to the actual topic. But I just wanted to give you an example.
And I watch all of you.
Just like they was, or they're insanely delicious. They're just crazy. Like I throw it at you, I hit someone else. Yeah, they go. Underneath Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you here with us today. How many here are in an English class? How many students here are in an English class? Where are the rest of you from? What other classes? Okay.
What was the class?
Food and culture. Food and culture. Anything else? Just for the fun of it?
Just for the.
There you go. Typically, at these sorts of things, my job is to introduce the president, and typically what we do is we tell you everything he's ever done in his past work history, but since you all have extreme Google skills, I know I don't have to do that. I know you could just Google Ty Handy and you'll know everywhere he's ever worked and where
My criminal record.
and his previous brief association with the criminal. But what I want to talk with you about for just a couple of minutes is the concept of culture. So in the simplest of terms, we could define culture as both the way we think and the way we act. So it's the thoughts you have and it's the actions you can take. And when you come to a new job, like coming to the presidency of Jefferson, you're inheriting a piece of old culture and you have an opportunity to craft a new culture. And at this point in history, both for our college, our state, and our country, culture is evolving all around us. We feel it every day. We see it in the news, we feel it in our classrooms, we feel it in our home life. So to do cultural change, you have to have two key things. You have to have vision. You have to be able to see things as they are and imagine them as they could be. And you have to have courage. So that courage comes from both having the courage to speak truth to power. Maybe it's by writing an editorial to the Courage Journal. Maybe it's by listening to what people have to say that you may not agree with. So in our brief time with Dr. Handy as our president, he's been here for 1 year, we've both seen these demonstrations of vision and courage. You don't always have to agree, but you have to be open to hearing everyone's truth. And you have to have the courage to move a person, a group, or an institution like a college forward. So I want you to come with me into welcoming Dr. Handy here to Southwest. It's his first time addressing a class here today. And welcome Dr. Ty Handy. He's our fourth president of Jefferson.
Donna's leaving because she's already heard it all in the last month. So thanks for having me today, and I appreciate the invitation. And I look forward to talking with you all. Of course, this is primarily, I've got a lot of faculty in the room, and that's great and wonderful, but I really want to try to work with the students a lot today. What I don't want to have happen is when I start trying to have conversation, if you're a student, don't worry that there's faculty here. Please participate anyways, okay? Because I want to hear your opinions on this matter. And so let me give a little bit of background in terms of, I've been a president now for 16 years, even though I've been here for 1 year. So I can't say I've seen it all, but I've seen a lot of it at different places. And when I came in, I felt like I needed to find my voice in some fashion. So very early on, within a month of being here, I published, or I put out my first editorial. And the Courier was very interested in that because apparently it's not something that a lot of college presidents do that often. And so they were sort of pleased to see me do it. Right on the heels of that, his name was David Jones Jr., and his father was the founder of Humana, and he runs a foundation, $300 million or something like that, very wealthy. He was also the board chair for JCPS, the Jefferson County Public Schools. So a pretty powerful position. And I'll just say it like he said it. When he called me in, I hadn't been to the job 6 weeks probably, and he said, we need a voice for higher education in this community. And he said, quite frankly, Jim Ramsey, the president of U of L's voice is not going to be heard, because he was having some issues at U of L. Bellarmine's president had passed away. So they didn't have a voice, really. And he said, I want you to step in and, help Jefferson, help higher education yourself by trying to be that voice. So I sort of doubled down on thinking about editorials. And I was already planning on doing them, but I hot topic is that's affecting education. I have freedom of speech. People think I'm speaking for the college, right? So I have to watch what I say because even though it's technically not true, I'm speaking for myself. People hear it as if it's a college position. So I want to touch the emotional, heavy-duty issues facing the community for which education is can be a part of solving or working with, and yet do it in a fashion that doesn't cause me or the college any harm, right? The most recent one that you've seen, I think, is the immigration one. And of course, that was a pretty, the hard part on writing an editorial is they only want to publish, I think it's 750 words or something like that. Every one of my editorials exceeds the word limit by 50%. Because the hard part about good writing is bringing it down, right? Narrowing it down. There's a joke about speaking that I think it was, I'm not going to think the president's name, but he said, if you want me to give you a 5-minute speech, you need to get on my calendar 3 months in advance. If you want me to give you a 15-minute speech, you'll need to get on my calendar 3 weeks in advance. And if you want me to just talk on and on about something, I can begin now. Right? And that's the same way sort of with writing. What's that? Truman, yes, Harry Truman said that. So when you try to bring something like this down, because it's your own product, every word pull this phrase or that phrase or what have you. And so that's the difficulty. And then if you pull a sin like I do, and you submit one that's too long, that they would rather see shorter, now you run the risk of them deciding what you want to say, or what you meant to say. And the next thing you know, the key point that had to be in there isn't in there anymore. So it's an interesting, now they've been pretty good to me, and they've actually run longer editorials than they normally would run. So far they haven't called me on the carpet. I'll call that the luck of being the president here, or what have you maybe. They're giving me a pass. But there's some risk involved in that. I don't profess to be a great writer. That's not my background. My background is finance, business. So if I've said something well, it's probably somebody who's read that thing as I was working through it and advised me on how to reword it a little better. So I'm trying to identify topics that are of community interest, that create an emotional engagement in the issue, to connect it to how higher education is either causing that problem or can help solve that problem, and sort of advance the Jefferson agenda while I'm doing that without hopefully offending too many. And so immigration, pretty hotly charged topic right now, right? I guess the way I tend to think of it, and put this in an article, is we're probably not saying anything today. If you listen to everything under the surface 10, 15, 20 years ago, but all of a sudden we have this climate where it looks like we can just sort of, doesn't matter what way. And so we're saying things that are emotionally charged. They may not be fully thought out. And I wanted to try to write an editorial reason. One that drew the conversation away from the emotional aspects of the challenge and talk about the reality. Policy for the United States very effectively, because I don't play at that level. What I think of is the people that I interact with. And the people I interact with at school. And so you've got the data in that, some data in that article, pushing 10% of our student population. It's one door down from me. Almost every evening I have a conversation with a chemistry PhD student at U of L from India who walks by where I live for a couple of minutes. And so I'm able to personalize this, and I felt like I wanted my tone to be more individualistic than about immigration policy writ large, because it's so easy to take a position on immigration policy. You know, if you're here illegally, you should not be here. Versus the other extreme would be open the floodgates. It doesn't matter, right? And so somewhere in between is where we have. So this is my small contribution, I guess, to the dialogue. I also gave you a second one that if we have time we'll talk about a little bit. I did this one back in August, right after one of the shootings had occurred. I forget which one exactly that it was, but you know, we've had a number of shootings around the country. You can probably count them that really made the big time news. I was a law enforcement officer for about 4 topic. Okay, at the time, it died down a little bit, but not a lot. But I'm trying to show the role of education in impacting that particular topic. But back to immigration. So we've got these two extremes. We've got the idea that safety is more important than anything else, and therefore, if someone is here on anything other than a valid visa or what have you, and it's not valid, we should immediately deport them, no matter what. To the other extreme, we were founded on principles of, you know, engagement, and everybody can come, and we're the melting pot of the world, and we're just going to be open, right? And these are polar opposite views, and we wrestle with where we ought to be. So let me ask a couple questions to get you engaged just a little bit, maybe. If a person has committed a felony crime, felony crime is defined as a crime, we tend to think of the violent ones, but that's not. A felony is a crime for which your sentence, your prison sentence, can be longer than 1 year. So it ranges from theft over $250. So if you steal a TV set from a Walmart, okay, and it's valued at $269, that can be a felony, all the way up to the big ones, right? Murder, rape, whatever. Just hands right off the individual, if they're here illegally, should be sent back to the country they came from. Raise your hand if you think that. So a lot less than last year. I'm going to call that the influence. Okay, so only about 5. I would say 2/3 last group. Yeah. A little harder on the next. About in terms of a misdemeanor crime. And a misdemeanor is something for you can get up to a year in prison. Right? That ranges from a speeding ticket. The argument, she's mentally beat me, which I can assure you would happen. And I hear and say, get the hell out of here. Right? I just committed. Want me to touch her? I didn't hurt her or anything. But I've committed assault. That could get up to 1 year in jail for that misdemeanor crime. And only a few of you raised your hands on the felony, so this will probably be even a smaller group. Should we deport an illegal immigrant who has committed a misdemeanor crime? Raise your hand. So a couple of people say that. And then there's this in between. Somebody who doesn't commit felonies routinely, misdemeanors. So somebody in the last session had some research that they had done for a paper they're writing, and they talked about a person who had 23 misdemeanors. Okay, let's don't go to that extreme. And you've committed it and you're convicted of it, should you have to serve the prison sentence that the judge gives you? Raise your hand if you should have. I'm going to take a different tack than I took with the last group because of the different way. How is that different? Why would a U.S. citizen, let's have a conversation, why would double the number of you say a U.S. citizen should do the time for the crime, but an illegal immigrant should not be sent back to where they came from? Help me understand that. Help me out. Go ahead.
Well, I voted no for everything
Okay.
you said, and I think justice is not always equal. There's a different level of justice, sometimes based on prejudices, and partially for a crime. And then you have to think adult TV.
Yeah, you may be signing a death wish for somebody. You're right. You're absolutely right. So if you're from a very hot, if you left Venezuela under the shadow of a government that might have killed you if you'd stayed, sending them back home is a pretty strong verdict, isn't it? Pretty strong decision. So I would disagree with you on that. Other perspectives on that? Easier to think about this, I'm going to suggest, in the abstract. That is, we think about all immigrants, right? And we think about the collective, and we don't have to personalize it so much. And so if you look at how I tried to write my essay, I actually tried to do that with a less emotionally charged way of getting there. So I used economics, right? You can't get more impersonal than economics. Because it seems to me whenever I've had these conversations with individuals, hallway conversations or conversations in the neighborhood, emotion creeps in, influencing factors creep in, and it's hard to have the discussion because people are so vested in that emotional response. And so I chose to lead in with something that I thought was a little risky because it might cause people to think, I'm not religious or I don't really care. It all goes down to dollars and cents. But I tried to pose an economics argument for this situation. And we're hearing it a lot from the Trump administration because we've had this law in place called NAFTA now for a North American Free Trade Agreement. And so goods can come out of Mexico or Canada to the U.S. and our goods can go there, and the borders are supposed to be sort of without walls. And what that's supposed to do is allow all of us, the theory is, because resources get deployed more effectively. And that's what economics is all about. Effective deployment of resources. If we build the best computers in the world, shouldn't we dedicate our resources as a country to building those computers? And if Mexico assembles the best vehicles in the world, shouldn't they dedicate more of their resources to building the best vehicles? And if we're taxing each other's stuff across these borders, and we're playing games to try to keep American jobs, or Mexico's playing games to try to keep Mexican jobs, or Canada's doing the same thing. As we're playing those games, aren't we hurting all the systems? Theoretically, I ought to be able to go buy a car that's assembled somewhere else because it's less expensive for me, because that country was able to carry out that task less expensively than the U.S. could. A less expensive car, I have more resources to spend on other things, some of which America does the best, so we're doing those things. So there's this notion of being effective, and I wanted to translate that into what we're doing when we hire somebody, bring it to an individual level. And so when I'm going to hire somebody, I have an opening right now for the position for solutions. This is a person who's going to be in charge of going out to companies and generating training for those companies. And I'm sorry, Joe. Okay? And so I want to hire a man into that job. Now that's a risky statement because who knows, we might hire a man into that job. But I haven't even interviewed for it yet. Well, by saying that, I have just harmed the economic effectiveness of this college, right? And this community, because these employers are dependent upon that person to help decide and help design the training that their employees need, okay? And I've allowed an emotional perspective, a prejudice of my own, to interfere with doing what's best for the community. Everybody see that and agree with that? And so one of the points I wanted to try to make is, anytime we decide who gets to do a job based on anything other than them being the most effective resource for doing that job, we've not only harmed because we're not maximizing our economic impact. And to me, that translates to our immigrant population. I look at the immigrant students that I see at the college, and some of that data is in the article. First of all, they have a higher GPA on average at Jefferson. Secondly, they succeed and graduate at a higher rate. than our regular non-immigrant student. When I talk to immigrant students, well, I don't get to talk as much as I would like to talk to students, but several conversations that I've had, and there's a complaint that I hear from immigrant students. Okay, and once they really get to talking to me, I get a little bit of a complaint. And what they try to say to me is our faculty are unprofessional. Now think about that for a minute. Our faculty are unprofessional. Why would they think that? Why would some of them think? I'll tell you why. Because they come from cultures where the faculty member is something challenging. You don't get in an argument with them, right? And so they come from a culture, and they come here where we have this notion of freedom of expression, right? Where there is a give and take, oftentimes, where you can disagree, where a faculty member can let their hair down about a topic and talk about something or whatever on a much more informal basis, right? And they view that as, you know, oh my goodness, that's unprofessional, right? Big cultural difference. And when they're complaining to me, I realize they're really not complaining about that. It's just showing me just how serious their education is to them. They want to live the American dream. And they know that the American dream involves educational opportunity for them. That if they're going to win this game, okay, in our society, and education is going to make a difference. And so they're very, very serious about it. And so I look at these students, and I talk with these students that I've met here at the college, and at other colleges that I've been at, and I compare that to what I hear in the 144-letter tweets that are getting blasted on CNN or whatever that Trump wrote yesterday, or what have you, and I have a hard time connecting the two all the time. Because my experience with the immigrant population is somewhat different than the national dialogue would seem to present it. Another point sort of on this same topic, I guess, is I have not seen data nationally that tells me that illegal immigrant populations are 2 times more likely to commit felonies than non-immigrant populations. Has anybody seen any data on that? Okay. I have not seen any data that would indicate that when we look at felony crimes, that illegal immigrant populations are more likely to commit felony crimes, statistically, than non-immigrant populations. In other words, I don't think anybody's bothered to test the premise. And the premise that we're being trained to accept is that open borders result in a lot more felonious crimes, major criminal activity, than if we didn't have quasi-open borders. And I've not seen data that if we took a random sample of U.S. citizens, 1,000 of them, and looked at their criminal behavior, background, so forth and so on, and compared it to a random sample of 1,000 illegal immigrants, that those populations wouldn't be comparable. I've not seen any data that would indicate it. So if you're a social science faculty member, there's your research topic, or what have you. And yet, I certainly have heard rhetoric that would seek to train me to believe that's the case. It may be the case, I don't know. But if I go back and read the tweets and the posts and so forth and so on, I'm going to get a heavy dose of that's the truth. And yet I haven't really seen any research evidence. It may be out there, I just haven't seen it that says that. I'm not an expert on immigration policy. But again, I do see the individuals I interact with, I think, deserve a different conversation. And so that's what I was trying to write to. Ask me some questions. Somebody have a question about what I said, what I did, why I might have said something in there? Or maybe I covered it. What do you think? When I teach statistics and accounting. I don't teach conversational courses, so I have the hardest time with a pause. I really struggle on the board of not having a conversation. So. Did you have a reaction Did you think I was wrong? Did you think I was misguided? Did you think I was... Raise your hand. Did anybody read that and say to themselves, I'm a little embarrassed to be a part of a school whose president would write this? Did anybody feel that way? No?
Here's out of your opinion.
What's that? Not everybody would agree with that. She said I'm entitled to my opinion. Not everybody would agree with that. Well, that was, so that was my primary point, was to try to take the emotion out of the argument and get people to think about this from the perspective of the individual. That was probably if I had a, or what have you. So has it worked? I've probably had a dozen contacts from the community now who want me to come talk to this group or talk to that group or be a part of this discussion or be a part of that discussion. It was made required reading for a few people in a couple of places. So it resonated with some, I guess. Brian, I'm not going to think of his last name, but he's the Director of Global Initiatives for the City of Louisville. International outreach and things like that. He's using the article some and stuff. A national firm reached out and wanted me to twist it into their own. You know, they have an agenda and they are very much anti-Trump's direction, right? They want open without reservation or what have you. Put their organization's name in it and modified some, and so they could use it. No, I'm saying it stands as is. If you can't use it as it is, then it's not a product that was intended for you, right? Whereas I do the same thing on the other extreme if that was happening. But that's where we are. Now that was the fourth editorial I've written. The previous one I just gave you, I'm going to call it related in some sense. So you probably haven't read it yet or anything of that sort. But I wrote that one in a period of time where there was a lot of press about a couple of violent shootings of individuals by law enforcement officers. And I was 7 years ago when I became president of a college in Florida. It was the first college I'd been president of that had a law enforcement program. So instead of learning about the program, I went through it. And a little over 500 hours of training. I didn't do the entire legal side of the program, but I did all what's called the high liability stuff. Defensive tactics, so I got beat up a few times, and firearms, and first aid, and all the things that I might have to do out in the field. And I did enough to be fully sworn as an officer, which meant I carried a gun, I had arrest authorities, that sort of thing. I just didn't do it for a living. So I always rode with another officer instead of doing it all myself, and I would go a couple times a month and viewed it as my community service, sort of part of my community service role. And what I discovered was a group of law enforcement officers who really cared and who really wanted to serve the community. Every one of them. I didn't meet a single bad egg in 4 years of riding with different officers all the time. Didn't meet a single bad egg. But what I discovered, I thought, was their training got in their way an awful lot. Because the training was very systematized, right? So I was trained. When I was trained, treat every incident, every stop, every traffic stop, every encounter with the public, treat it as a possibility that you might not go home. Right? Because generally speaking, the law enforcement officer who gets shot or killed, it happens by surprise. Really, you get killed. Shot may be fired, but they weren't even ready for it, or what have you. So any stop you have, if there's any strange behavior, anything out of the ordinary, be left-handed, so be ready. Okay? And they beat that into you. I mean, just in scenario after scenario after scenario. Because they say, things I said was, you have the right to go home to your family tonight as a law enforcement officer. You didn't sign up on this to get killed. Right? So I wrote this editorial, and right below it was an editorial from Mayor Fisher of Louisville. Okay, right below it was his perspective. And the lead into his article, I kid you not, if you go back and look on the current, the lead in was, every officer has the right to go home to their family. Oh, okay? And here I am arguing against that point in my editorial. And I thought, oh no, now the mayor of Louisville is going to be, he never said a word. So, I mean, he must not have read it. Is what probably must not have read my editorial. But anyways, that's what you're taught. And it's good teaching. You should be in the moment. If you're a law enforcement officer, you can't afford to be asleep at the wheel, because when the bad thing happens, if you're not ready, you don't get to go home at night. Right? So we would make a stop. A car up on I-10. I-10 runs the panhandle of Florida. Lots of drugs moving between Texas and Miami. Right? So I-10 is the corridor where all that's going to happen. Car doing 95 miles an hour in a 65-mile-an-hour zone. You pull it over, right? 3 young people in it. Rental car. That's how drugs are delivered these days. You don't want to lose your own car. Rent a car. Okay, so and they have little stickers, barcodes where they get scanned in and out. You can tell a rental car. Okay, so we pull them over. Should we be heightened as law enforcement officers on the interstate? Right? Yeah. Now, I'm going a little more detail here because I have more time. I was actually trained not to worry about that as a stop. That person's going to get a speeding ticket. Somebody hauling $3 million in drugs isn't doing 95 miles an hour down the interstate. Okay? They're doing, speed limit 70, they're doing 68. Okay? You stop them for tinted windows, or you stop them for a burnt out tail light. Or the one I loved, which really caused me, and I say love, that engaged me the most, is I'd sit there on the side of the interstate and a car would go by and he'd go, we're going to stop that. And we'd pull out to go stop it, and I'd go, well, what's the premise? You're not able to just legally stop a car, right, like that? Following too closely. Right? Which is illegal, right? For the life of me, I couldn't remember if there's even a car in front of it. Okay? Probably was. That's me being green, or what have you. Should you be heightened for that stop? Well, they tell you to be heightened attention for every single stop. So let me take it to its logical extension. Okay? I'm down on the coast. Walton County is where I served. Walton County, almost 2 communities. You have the beaches of 30A, where Jerry Jones, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, lives, and Britney Spears, and Luke Bryan, and Mike Huckabee, and just a who's who of personas. Wealthy, wealthy, wealthy. You get inside the county, and it's very rural. A lot of meth being manufactured and stuff. It's like Appalachia almost. Inland or what have you. So let's put ourselves down on the beaches of 30A. You're in an elite neighborhood, and you're driving through, and here's a young black male. So the cop beside me is the one making the decision on who to stop and who not to stop. Goes and pulls them over. Should he pay attention? Trained to always be that way. Is it unusual that an African American male would be in this neighborhood? Not really. Okay? I didn't name Lawrence Taylor home in that neighborhood. Okay? Several athletes. Of some of those, majority of those homes. All right? So you start to get a sense, I hope, of the little bit of challenge with my training. If you draw your weapon, a weapon is not a threat to fire into the air to hit somebody and stuff. That's TV. If you have pulled your gun, it is because you're together. If you've been trained and you can't think situationally, I'm told we're pulling over somebody and something seems a sudden move is made, or something else happens. The next part of my training is you pull. You pull because you don't use it. Surprise you. Okay, we might have killings. Right? There was no reason for this to have happened, and yet it did. The investigators defend the behavior because they're in the same way. I don't necessarily want to say it's prejudice on their part. I want to say they were trained, that's how they would have responded, because they had the same training. So my argument in the paper is that education, it's not about just training. We got to teach people to think about the totality of the circumstances, everything that's going on here, so that our reaction is in the context of what's going on, and there'll be less shootings. So my argument is you need at least a 2-year degree, probably a 4-year degree, to be a law enforcement officer. It'll be awful expensive to start hiring college graduates for those roles. But the price we're paying without it seems pretty high to me. And so that was my argument on that one. That one's gotten actually some national, just in the last couple of weeks I had a contact from a faculty member in the Cal State system who wanted to use it for her graduate school instruction in criminal justice to try to show the ins and outs of that sort of thing. So it's gotten some traction. I actually relate the two articles to some extent, in my mind a little bit, because, and I'll share something I didn't put in the article, but I almost feel like the rhetoric that we're reading today about immigration policy is an effort to train us. Okay? To train us into thinking certain perspectives about that group of people that may not be the truth, right? Just like I was trained in law enforcement, you know, they never said shoot first and ask questions later. But they got pretty doggone close to it by saying you deserve to go home to your family at night. If you hear that enough, what you begin to think is the citizen that's across from you doesn't have that same right. They don't deserve to go home to their family as much as you do, right? Is that going to make you be more likely to be violent towards them quicker? Text here and the way the dialogue's happening now about immigration policy, and we're getting it in snippets of 144 letters, right? And so emotionally, most of us would agree, no matter what community we live in, we have the right to. And so emotionally, that point is being driven home, 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 when I'm not sure the data supports that what we're actually doing is enhancing our safety. Does that make sense? You were going to ask a question?
I think the word training doesn't fit for the immigration issue as much as it does the law enforcement issue, because the training in law enforcement is literally drill, 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 drill. I think the immigration issue that we're hearing so much about now is maybe bending your mind. I don't want to see brainwashing.
Sure, I understand, yeah.
Harsh,
But yeah, but
I see it as training my mind.
I understand, okay, and I don't disagree with you, except from the standpoint that the way I'm receiving the immigration, the way I perceive the immigration discussion today is in snippets. I don't get to see a long, drawn-out, thoughtful process of, you know, reasoning for why we should be doing this or doing that. What I get is that little soundbite, and it's so polarized. And it's almost always, and now, and that sort of thing, that I feel like, maybe training's not the right word, I'm just trying to connect the two a little bit, or what have you. Because I think any of us who sit down with any of these issues probably ultimately realize they're a lot more complex, and the Twitter feed is going to let us discuss them, right? There's a lot more ins and outs and caveats for this sort of thing. A little story about a student that I had in Florida. She came to me, she was from Italy, 3.95 GPA, the college that I was at. She had come in the 10th grade as a foreign exchange student. By the way, how do most of our illegal aliens get here? Illegal immigrants get here? What do we think? What's the natural thing that we think? Yeah, we think they crossed the desert in the middle of the night, right? Under threat, you know, a coyote brought them over or whatever. And I can't even tell you what proportion entered the U.S. that way. Every illegal alien I've ever met, and I've met a number of them, they came in on a student visa. They came here to be a college student. They loved America. They wanted to work. You can't get employers sponsoring you. But they can't employ you unless you have a green card. It's what we call the catch-22 scenario. You can't meet the rules or what have you. And so they illegally went to work when they had a student visa instead of a work visa, with the hope that someday they'll get through the bureaucratic nightmare, and they'll be able to translate that into a work. I don't know. I've ever met illegal immigrants. That's how that happened, or whatever. And so I don't have experience with that, with the other group, or whatever. Now, I forgot where I was going with that. I've lost my train of thought. Oh, this lady from Italy. So she comes to me and she says, I want to go to, she's been with us, she's now been at Florida State University. Great GPA there. She wants to go to med school. Okay? She'd applied to about a half dozen med schools. Why? Because she did not have, she was not a U.S. citizen or have a green card. Because there's such a shortage of doctors and stuff here that they don't give any of their spaces in med school to students they think are going to leave the country when they graduate. Okay, so that we need doctors so badly, if you're going to go to Florida State's med school, or the University of Florida, or UK's, or U of L's, okay? People with green cards. Doesn't have a green card. So she had gone to an immigration attorney there in Florida. Lots of immigration attorneys in Florida. Any idea? There you go, marry an American. That was legal advice. It cost her $500. Go marry. Because all of her applications had been to public medical schools. She hadn't applied to any private medical schools. And my son was a student at the University of Chicago, which has a medical school. So I told her, my advice was, look into some private schools. Because Vanderbilt doesn't live those rules. And U Chicago doesn't live under those. And I asked her also, do you plan on going back to Italy? And you could see, oh, no, in the U.S. Or in this case, to get into the medical school. Now, well, my son got married, not to her. Okay, so that wasn't the end, but I connected them together. That didn't happen, and she is, I believe, now in med school. Okay, and she's at one of these private schools, so it didn't work out for her. But here's a circumstance: somebody an illegal green card or something and manipulated her way in. She would have done it because she stayed in the U.S. that badly. And this is a 3.95 GPA top student. One, I try to relate the two a little bit. I'm getting ready. I'm due about 2 months now to write my next one. Okay, and so right now I'm thinking, okay, free community college tuition for all North Carolinians. Okay, and a couple of other communities, not just a couple, a lot of other communities have gone to that. Tennessee is the only other state to have done it, but now North Carolina is aggressively pursuing it. We're starting next fall, free college tuition for anybody who majors in one of 5 fields. So there's 5 fields that the governor's identified as high-end, high labor needs for us. I'm not going to name them all, but logistics and advanced manufacturing and nursing and allied health and IT, information technology, and construction trades. Those are the 5, I think, that have been identified. So there'll be free tuition for people pursuing degrees in those areas. It's the first step, maybe a baby step, towards free college tuition. So that's the next one I'm thinking about. It's probably going to be a polarizing issue. Because think about it this way. There's a lot of people who would say, if something isn't worth much, it's free. Right? If you don't have skin in the game, you're not going to take it very seriously. Right? And so there's going to be 2 sides to this argument, or what have you, about it.
How do you feel about it?
How do I feel about it? I could spend, what time do we end here, by the way? What time do we end? 2:04, oh, we got plenty of time. So I'm going to get a little deep on this one from my rationale. My worry is that it's going to be available to people who come fresh out of high school. So you graduate from high school, you can now get this free college tuition. And here's the bottom line, it's always a last dollar. And if there's any, $3,000 in federal financial aid, but the cost for tuition and fees is $4,000. You're $1,000 away. The state. My worry is we're going to have all these people come out of high school who feel like they have to go to college right now because that benefits there. They're going to go to college, they're going to do the federal financial aid form. Then they will not have been serious enough in their work, and they'll get a 1.5 GPA. They'll be on academic probation. They won't do well. The next thing you know, they're out of college. And now, because they applied for federal financial aid, they'll never be eligible for aid again. So they had one chance to get it for free. And because it didn't work, it's a one strike you're out model. And now we're going to come back. They're going to go off, they're going to join the military, they're going to get a job, they're going to do whatever, they're going to grow up. And 2 or 3 years later, they're going to come back and they're going to be a different person. They know it's important. They're going to do the job. Okay? My first job out of high school, this is what made me a good college student. My first job out of high school, I was a lung sucker at a chicken disassembly plant in Glasgow, Kentucky. Okay? A chicken came down the line, hanging by his feet, upside down. I had a suction gun. I ran it down in their tail end, through their tail end, grabbed their lungs and sucked them out. Because the lung is the only organ that sticks to the cavity of the bird. The rest just flops out. Isn't that exciting stuff? Yeah, well, do we have any fried chicken here? So that probably did as much to motivate me to do well in college as anything my parents ever said to me, or what have you, because I made $2.65 an hour that summer doing that job. And I really knew where I was going with that. But there's my worry, is some people are going to take advantage of it and get a free education, but just as many are not going to succeed in that first pass, and then the ability to come back when they are ready for college will be gone. Because now when they come back, you have to spend a whole year where you have to get yourself up out of academic probation. So if you got a 1 GPA that first year, now you come back, you need a 3.0 next year to average out okay, you got to figure out of your own pocket. Having the money to pay for it. My fear is that that's going to hurt a lot of people. As much as I want extra students. Okay, so as a president, I'm kind of torn. I like it, but I am worried about what it does to success rates. And do some academic forgiveness for somebody based on life circumstances. So you could go off for a couple of years, come back, and we could give you a track. And the feds, surprises, this went away under President took it away. And so only for medical, death in the family, there's like 3 things that we can give you a second chance for. The documents and why you did succeed the first time. And growing up, or whatever, is not one of those. When I was 18 years old, if I hadn't worked in that chicken plant, I'm not sure how well I'd have done it. I wouldn't have taken it as seriously. Because as Dad would joke, we finished the phone call, I went to a school in Virginia and Kentucky, and he would say, and at the end of the night, well, other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think your personal experiences with, you say you look at one side of the grant,
about education or things like that, I think I have a bit of a national perspective on things. But when it comes to an issue that's so emotionally charged, it's, for me, I'm just not talented enough in this. It's hard to think in the abstract. Abortion as an issue. Not down to the personal or my family, I tend to think about it a little differently than when I think about the overall. Right? I actually trust myself more when I'm thinking about it at this lower level, at this individual level. And you can take any of these sort of hot button issues, and I think it's easy to think about them on a large. Actually hit you personally, it might be different, right? We had Vice President Cheney, right? Daughter came out homosexual, right?
Yeah.
About it. He had to be doing some wrestling with his colleagues' view on the overall versus his personal view of someone he loved very much, right? And so I like to take these sorts of issues and really quickly bring them down to the personal. And what I see is 30% of our entering freshmen this past fall didn't come back this spring. Okay, so fall students who were in versus who came back in the spring. So we lost basically 1 in 3 students. If they were getting a free college ride, and because now they're gone for academic reasons or something, when they do decide to come back, they can't go to that well anymore. that really, I can think about that personally a lot more easily than I can think about the overall concept of the issue. So I try to, that's my own coping mechanism with these issues, I guess.
Do you think it clouds your judgment though, having these personal experiences and not really knowing the other side of it?
If it does, I'm glad my judgment is clouded, because otherwise I'm left with just reading, listening to the rhetoric that's going on out there, the emotional charged two-sided argument or what have you, and lining up on one side or the other based on how I feel, based on that personal experience or what have you. So I would, I'll take that, and I'll accept, I'll own that prejudice maybe in my own perspective. Okay? I'll share my perspective in here. I wouldn't do it in the article because it would be viewed as a Jefferson's perspective. But my perspective is, if you're convicted of a felony, all right, just like you would do time here as a citizen, you should probably be deported. If we determine that deportation is life risk for you, then you do the time here. But you committed the felony, all right? I'm a little more comfortable. I don't like this idea. There was an attorney who's now advised all immigrants, don't get a traffic ticket. This is not the time in your life to be running up against authority. You need to keep your head down and avoid any circumstance where you might be singled out. But let's take it to its actual extreme. We have a quick recall team here at the college. Anybody on the quick recall team here in this room? We have a quick, so it's your academic brains. Think geek on steroids, right? I went to one of their training things, not at this school, but at another school that also had a program. I sat there for 2 hours with a buzzer in my hand and all these other students, and I buzzed in once, okay? I could not beat the rest of them on anything that was coming up, okay? And I remember the answer. The answer was Thornstein Veblen, and he was an economist or whatever. They didn't know who it was. I got that right. I got danced, or what have you. So that's the closest I've come to being on one of these teams. Last year, Jefferson won the national championship. Okay? We even beat the University of Michigan. Okay? We beat four-year schools. Okay? We were really, really good. This year we were ranked 3rd. National tournament is in Milwaukee. They're going to fly. One of our team members, Hispanic, after talking with his family, refused to go. And we needed him on the team. The risk was too great to get on a plane that he felt, and his family felt, exposed him to the risk of deportation. I don't know that he's illegal. I don't know any of his immigration status. I just know.
He's not illegal.
Okay, he's not. Okay, so I don't know that. It doesn't matter. He couldn't fly inside the United States from Louisville to Cincinnati or to Milwaukee.
I wonder if you would have thought that 2 years ago.
Well, I don't know. Absolutely not. I don't think that's the case. So we've heightened our anxiety, right? And the reality is, and this hopefully doesn't surprise people in here, but of the last 3 presidents, the easiest president, I believe, on immigration was George W. Bush. Okay? Not Barack Obama. Barack Obama, under that administration, there were a lot to Barack Obama. Now, he'll run his mouth a lot more about it, but the reality is, Trump's going to have to step up his game if he's going to deport more people than were deported in that previous 8-year period. So if you ran up against, you're probably not here anymore. But now we're talking about it. And we're talking about it in these bite-sized snippets that are very impersonal and even feel offensive. Well, we have some folks here from Kentucky Refugee Ministry. Do you have a perspective on this? Have you followed what I'm saying? How do you feel about this?
Because there are many migrants here, and he's carrying the American law.
Okay.
But I just...
So you see why he would be having the position he would have, right? But I appreciate that. That's great, isn't it? So here's somebody who could be, at some point, it might happen, right? I just feel we need to be really deliberate about what we do here, because I'm not certain that group of individuals has any greater propensity to creating safety problems for us than others. Does that make sense? Right?
why do we have such a problem dealing with somebody that's a convicted felon, but a girl that's got a 3-point, I mean, why do we lump everybody into this? Why do we have such a problem separating those two out?
So I have a personal view of that. So his argument is, you know, why can't we look at things circumstantially, right? And that would require human judgment, right? That would require, you know, I sort of joke with the president's staff that I work with sometimes that if we could just drill everything down to a policy, we wouldn't need managers anymore. We wouldn't need anybody to think through the circumstance. So if we write the policy, Jefferson's part of a 16-college system, and I'm convinced that's the system mentality. If we can write the policy tight enough, then there's no need for humans to ever step in and make a judgment call. And then we end up in these circumstances where we're treating somebody who clearly is going to be, I mean, this young lady is going to be a neurologist or an orthopedic surgeon or something someday here in the United States, and yet we're arbitrarily making it harder on her when we need people in that profession, right? And so our own policies harm us. And I think that's just our own unwillingness to allow individuals to make circumstantial decisions about stuff. It happens in law enforcement. You probably don't know this. Practices. When a police officer stops you, if he's stopping you for a felony, the law, the statute says to the officer, you will arrest for, and then it lists the crime. Okay? Or what have you. You will. You don't have a choice. A felony has happened, then you don't have when I went to domestic violence circumstance, and I did 3 or 4 of those in the 4 years that I was there, somebody was going to jail. Okay? If there was evidence of violence, somebody was going to jail. Couldn't afford to leave them together, leave and find out one killed the other. Right? So somebody had you will arrest. Misdemeanor, you may. The law enforcement has, the officer has the latitude to look at the circumstance and make a decision. So practice, because you can get out of the ticket. Okay? And it's not illegal. The law enforcement has the right. Now, does that create a situation where somebody who's prejudiced, right, is going to see one circumstance different than another? Yes. That's the downside to having the latitude to think about things. If somebody carries in a body of prejudice into what they do, it's liable to show up in the data or what have you, in the way the arrest or the citation is handled. But I don't know, kind of interesting to me that law enforcement will arrest for felony. Exactly. Doing about 95 miles an hour, 70 mile line. We get out, we go up to the van, roll it. Allowed to go. Okay, he used his discretion. I was back up, so allowed to go. Anyone? Mustang? Not even seatbelt. Okay? Nice guy, nice everything, just didn't do it. Right? We come back to the car after we're registering things, and the one guy says, what do you think? Gives me the choice. I thought about the man, and let's give him a warning. So we did. Right? But you're in 2 circumstances, totally different. Could your prejudice affect? No. I don't know. Somebody else? Probably work. Given a decent rationale for what you did is the most likely way. Right? Being obstinate is probably not going to work, but just sort of say, yeah, and that's the most likely way to get a warning. So, other questions? Other comments? Yes? Oh, yeah, so somehow or another in the conversation last time, one of the things that came up under the economic impact of this is that in Louisville right now, the Louisville metropolitan area, there are over 30,000 unfilled jobs posted. Now think about that for a minute. 30,000 unfilled jobs posted. So to sit here in this community and start to argue that, well, the immigrant population are taking away jobs that are available for everybody else, it's hard to argue that that holds water. Those jobs run the gamut, from the most menial up to, the most highly, top engineering or medical sort of positions. The majority of them require some college level work, and therein lies the rub in the Louisville metropolitan area. We have a lot of people who don't qualify for those jobs. And so if we have immigrant populations able to come in and fill those jobs, it not only helps them, but it helps those companies grow and expand. A specific example is a company out in Jefferson town called Landtech. And they manufacture, this sounds really mundane, but they manufacture equipment that wraps goods once they're manufactured. So it's saran wrapping to the extreme. So you got a pallet of Coca-Cola bottles, and you don't want them to fall over in the shipping, and so you have this machine that wraps saran wrap around them. Once they're packaged, 4 or 5 wraps, cuts it off. Now they'll ship and they won't fall over. Pretty mundane, right? 400 employees making this equipment for the employees in this manufacturing plant. Also has a plant in the growth. Every bit of his research and development is happening in the Netherlands because he can find costing our people jobs because they're not prepared for them. But for every one of those jobs, for every 10 of those jobs that are out there, there's 2 other jobs out in the community that support those jobs, right? So it is, for me, it's not a zero-sum game where immigrants are displacing U.S. workers. I don't, from an economics background, I don't buy that. It may happen on one-on-one occasions, but in terms of the overall, no, we've got too many jobs available, too many skilled positions available. We need to be filling those. And when we look at the jobs that are available in Louisville, so many of them are what we call livable wage. That even a family of 4 doesn't need any sort of federal or state support to get by on, because these are good paying jobs. The key is getting some people some education for them so they can access these jobs. All right. I thank you very much for having me. And, I'm sorry, one more thing very important. I want to end on this. Why do you think they printed my editorial? Either one of them? Why do you think they printed it? One of the students answered that question. Why did they print my editorial? And somebody in the last class said it right away. Said, because you're the president.